Well, hi once again, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. And we're recording this later in 2023, but this is going to appear to you in 2024. Can you believe it? It's been 2.5 years since Unstoppable Mindset began in August of 2021. Jeez. Well, anyway, we are so glad you're here. And today we're talking with Dr. Susan Lovelle. And Susan is the founder of Premier Wellness, which is changing its name to Advanced Performance, Balanced Performance. And she'll have to tell us why she's changing the name. But I see that happening all the time. My blindness was caused by something that used to be known as retrolental fibroplasia. And somewhere along the line, they changed the name to retinopathy prematurity. And that's fine. But gee, I loved retrolental fibroplasia, so I still don't know why they changed the name, but I'm sure they'll say it was more accurate and who knows what, but people tend to change names. What do you do? Anyway, we are so glad that you're all listening. And Susan, we are very grateful that you're here with us today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much, Michael.
After that long dissertation about grousing about name changes. Well, why don't we start by, I love to do it this way. Why don't you tell us about some of the early Susan growing up and all that sort of stuff?
Oh, goodness.
I know. Does that take back memories or what?
It does. It does. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And before we left in 2002, we lived in 4 out of the 5 boroughs with my husband and I, but grew up in Brooklyn and loved it. I knew, though, at the age of 6 that I was going to be a doctor because I used to have a sore throat all the time. And so whenever I didn't want to go to school, I would say, oh, my throat hurts. And it was always red. And so they take me to the doctor. And the doctor would say, yeah, she's got, the sore throat. And I got to stay home. But I also fell in love with my pediatrician. And I told him at the age of 6 that I was going to be a doctor. And he said at that time, okay, when you're ready, you come back. And literally 20 plus years later, when I decided to go to medical school, I went back. He was still in practice, and he actually wrote me a letter to get me into medical school. So I think that had a lot to do with me getting in.
Wow. Yeah, nice to have friends.
Yes, it was. But in between 6 years old and going to medical school, I was a professional ballet dancer for 17 years. And that was because Saturday mornings, I used to get up and watch television and watch cartoons all day. And my mom was like, oh, no. This is not what you're doing. You're going to be doing something of value. And so she started taking me to dance classes. And I fell in love with ballet. And I ended up with the Dance Theater of Harlem, traveled the world with them to Europe, the Caribbean, all over across the United States. And it was a total of 17 years that I danced professionally.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, anything hard on the body, dancing is, sports are, professional sports, anything like that, you can't do it forever. And so it got to the point where I knew I wanted to do something else. And I remembered medicine. And so that's when I decided to take all my classes, for all the pre-med classes that I needed, and went back and got that letter and went to Columbia Medical School in New York City.
Dropped the sore throat excuse, huh?
I did. Yes.
Well, that is pretty cool. And so you went off to medical school. Well, before we get there, I have to ask, since you've lived in 4 of the 5 boroughs,
yes,
where are the best bagels?
Oh, definitely Manhattan. H&H Bagels. That was at least when I was there, that was where you went. They used to have lines around the corner for H&H Bagels. Loved them.
Now, where is H&H? I haven't been there.
Well, they're usually on street corners. I mean, I think they had one store where, like I said, the line would be around the block, but they would also sell them on like these little stands that would be on the corner. And you would just get this spectacular bagel off of a cart. They were just amazing.
I will have to get back there sometime and see if they're still around. Now I'm intrigued. I used to get Einstein Brothers bagels in New York.
Yes.
We visited Solomon Brothers and when they were still around. And so we went to Einstein. Of course, part of the issue was they were fresh, which is really what
Yes.
helps the flavor.
Oh yeah, you got to get them like right out of
Yeah.
right out of the oven.
We used to, when I was growing up, go to a bakery in Palmdale, California, where I grew up. On Saturday mornings, we would get rye bread, literally so hot out of the oven they couldn't put it in plastic wrap, so it came in paper bags
Oh my
and all that. And
goodness.
took it home, put butter on it, and a whole loaf did not last the whole family very long at all.
Of course not. Good bread is great.
Yeah. And I love to still do that with a bread machine, but so it's not quite the same, but not bad either.
No, it's not. No,
And
it's
then I
not.
also I buy stuff from a company called Wild Grain, which makes sourdough products, and they par bake it and then they send it to you frozen in dry ice. So you have to finish cooking it, so you get all the benefits of bread hot out of the oven, which is wonderful.
Yes, 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 yes.
Well, okay, so you went to medical school, and what
Mhm.
did you decide that you were going to focus on in medical school, having been
Oh.
a ballet dancer and all that stuff?
It was very interesting because when I went to medical school, I thought I was going to be a neurologist. There are some neurologic things that have been in my family for decades. And so that's where I started. And then when you're in your third year of medical school, you rotate through all of the different specialties. And I rotated through surgery. And I was like, wow, this is like the best thing ever. And then in the fourth year, you get to try different specialties within surgery. When I did surgery, it was really fun, but there were a lot of sick people. And then I did plastic surgery. I did my plastic surgery rotation, and that was like the ultimate. People would come in one way, you did their little thing, and then they went out a different way. They were happy, they were healthy because you couldn't have plastic surgery if you weren't healthy. And I just said, this is what I'm going to do for my career. And that's what I did for the next 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And enjoyed it.
And loved it, loved it. And still, if I could still do just the surgery without all the other stuff, I might still be doing some surgery.
What other stuff?
Well, charting and all
Mm.
of the regulations that have changed since when I first went into medicine. Yeah. It's changed a lot, unfortunately.
I'm a fan of old radio shows and listen a lot to Gunsmoke, and of course Doc on Gunsmoke. And you're right, he never complained about charting and doing all those other sorts of things. And
Not at all. Not at all.
a simpler time, as they say.
It was. Yes, it was.
Did you ever do any plastic surgery on anyone who we would all know?
Well, there were some that were kind of known in their fields. Let's put it that way. So yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Well, that is kind of cool.
Yeah, it is.
And you enjoyed it. What really made it special for you, that made you feel, besides the fact that you got to deal with healthy people?
Well, I mean, it was also the other big reason that I went into plastic surgery was because you also rotated. I mean, I also rotated through internal medicine, family medicine. And I knew that that wasn't what I would like to do because people would come in with a particular condition, say they came in with diabetes or high blood pressure, and you would give them a pill or whatever, and then they would go away and they would come back the next month with exactly the same thing going on, if they weren't even worse. And I said, I can't do that for the rest of my life. I wanted to make changes in people's lives. And so that was the other main reason that I went into surgery, and specifically plastic surgery, because I wanted to be able to help people change. And that has so much to do with what I do now.
So you did plastic surgery for 22 years, and I appreciate that. But what made you change?
Into what I do now today.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually first it was a personal change. And so if you can imagine, as a plastic surgeon, you're busy. You're in the operating room for hours on end. Some of my cases were 3, 6, 8 hours. I think the record, there was a 24-hour case. So can you
Wow.
imagine? This was teams. There were 3 different teams, but 24 hours we were working on this sprint. So with long cases, very grueling. And for the last 2/3 of my career, I was a solo plastic surgeon without any other plastic surgeons nearby. The closest would have been maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, very unlike, say, New York City.
Mhm.
And so I was very busy in the operating room all day long. But then, especially, a little while ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was still raising my children as well. And so I would operate all day or seeing patients all day and then come home. And then I was still taking care of my kids because I didn't want them to suffer because I chose to be a plastic surgeon.
Mhm.
So now I'm soccer mom going to debates and ball games and things like that, which would have still been okay if if I weren't the only plastic surgeon in the area. And so when you are at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the child gets bitten by a dog or falls off the table and gets a cut on their face, who are they calling? They're calling the plastic surgeon. So now this is me working almost 24/7 because there's nobody else to pick up that slack for me. And so it got to be really grueling after a while. And what eventually ended up happening was I no longer was taking care of myself. So I'm taking care of my patients, I'm taking care of my family, but I wasn't taking care of myself. And that's something I see a lot with the people I work with today. In me, it presented with me being very inflamed and eventually ending up in the intensive care unit 3 times in the space of 1 year. And I tell people, that third time, I almost didn't make it out of the intensive care unit, out of the hospital. I had gotten septic, which is a raging infection throughout your whole body. And there was nobody watching me at the time. And if my husband hadn't come unexpectedly to see me later that night, no one would have known. And I may have just slipped away. So that was my final wake up call, that third time. And that's when I said something has to change. And, initially what I changed was how I was eating. I started eating better because I had fallen into that. I'm busy, so I don't have time to cook real meals and I'll
Mhm.
just eat junk food. And, I had gained about 35 pounds, which on a 5'2" woman is a lot of weight. So, I started changing how I was eating, and then I started moving more. I started getting better sleep, and eventually I healed myself from what was going on. And I tried to do this with, I wanted to show this to my patients because this to me was the true transformation, not just having surgery on the outside, but changing how your body is actually working on the inside. And people who come in for plastic surgery don't necessarily want to change their diets. They just want to have their surgery. And so eventually I switched altogether to lifestyle medicine, which is what I do now.
Where were you practicing plastic surgery that you were the only one in the area?
The first 6 years was in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
Mhm.
That is Northeast North Carolina. And then we had moved out to Wichita, Kansas. So I was in a place called Newton, which is about a half hour outside of Wichita. And there were no other plastic surgeons. There were some in Wichita, but there were
Yeah.
none in Newton, which was about a half hour away. So for that 10, 15, almost 16 years, I was the only one within at least a half hour.
Wow.
Elizabeth City was an hour. Yeah. Elizabeth City
So,
was an
so
hour.
being from New York, why did you
Mhm.
end up going to North
Why did
Carolina
we
and then to
move?
Kansas? Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first move to Elizabeth City was the year after 9/11.
Mm,
And for someone who was born and raised in New York City, it just the city completely changed.
yeah.
The whole There was so much tension. It was almost like it was a police state. And we just didn't want to raise our children there. And so, yeah, I think we kind of went a little bit too much in the opposite direction because when we were in that first place in Northeast North Carolina, we were living right next to cornfields. So we went from New York City to living in cornfields in a county that had 3 traffic lights, 6,000 people, and 3 traffic lights. So that was a bit much. The second move was the year right around 2008. So we know what happened across the country.
Hmm.
And in small, small cities, plastic surgery, maybe not as important. So we
Elective.
right, exactly, exactly. So we moved to where there was a greater need for us at that point.
Well, when September 11th happened, of course, I was there and we were up in the tower and got out and stayed really not for an inordinately long time, but what happened was other job opportunities came along.
Mhm.
We weren't afraid to be there. So I
Mhm.
didn't get to see, however, I think a lot of the things that you saw and the times I've been back to New York since then, um, it changed. But in general, we found it to be a little bit quieter and a little bit more reflective kind of city than it had been ahead of time, which is also not a little bit of a surprise.
Oh yes, definitely right after it hit, it was very, very much reflective, very quiet and everything. It was that later aftermath
Yeah.
of of honestly maybe the fear. Growing up in New York, I tell people that we left our doors open all day long
Hmm.
in our neighborhood. We didn't lock our doors, we didn't shut our doors. Kids ran in and out of all of our homes. They're saying in New York City, you know, but that's the way we were raised. And that is not the way it was after
Hmm.
9/11. It really changed a lot.
I remember for at least the first month after September 11th, Rudy Giuliani was everywhere and he really did help lift the city up. Of course, a
Mm.
lot changed with him over the years too, which is extremely unfortunate. And if he had
Yes,
only
yes.
kept on the path that he did, but so many people changed, and that's the other part about it. We allowed fear to overwhelm us collectively, and
Exactly.
and that's a problem. And now we're really allowing fear to overwhelm us, and
Oh,
we do so much based on fear rather than really looking at things in a more reflective and um, substantive way where you stand back and look at things. Now we go, oh, well, this person's clearly in the know and telling us what we need to know. So we're not going to believe anything else. And that is so unfortunate.
it is. We've if you look at that, we've collectively stopped using our minds, our
Mm-hmm.
individual minds, and we've started just being in collectives. The group thinks this, and therefore I must think that as well. Yeah, it is, as you said, unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the economy and people are saying how bad the economy is. Okay, where's the evidence of that? We're spending more than we ever have. Our income is up to above pre-pandemic levels. And while some prices are up, basically most things are not. And it's just crazy.
Exactly. Well, like you said, it's that fear that kind of takes over, and it blocks out reason.
It does.
Unfortunately, yeah.
It does.
Unfortunately.
And that's why I started in during the pandemic, and it's going to come out next year. I talk a lot about not being afraid on September 11th, and that's because I learned what to do. I understood the process and really created a mindset that said, you know what to do in an emergency. And if the building comes down around you, there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it anyway. So you might be afraid for that last second before tons of stuff falls on you, but
Yes.
you know what to do. And so I was able to escape. And what I've realized over the years is I've never taught other people how not to be blinded by fear as I describe it. And so we wrote we're just about done with it, a new book entitled Live Like a Guide Dog, which talks about the lessons to learn about fear from my 8 guide dogs. And then we also had a breeder
Oh,
dog for guide dogs for the blind to talk, who was also part of the family, who became my wife's service dog. Karen was in a wheelchair her whole life. And Fantasia figured out how to fetch things for her and do other things for her. But all of these dogs had so many lessons that I observed and helped me understand how to live and not be afraid, or how to be afraid, but how to use that fear and focus it and not be blinded by it or paralyzed by it or overwhelmed by it, however you want to say it.
oh, I will be looking out for that book.
Plan is for it to come out in the July timeframe.
Oh, so soon. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll
Well, I
be.
say that because the years go by so quickly now.
I know, don't they?
Yes,
Time flies.
it does. It does.
But
Yes.
but I think that we really have just allowed fear to completely take away our reason, and it's so unfortunate that so many people don't want to think for themselves anymore, and we're better when we think for ourselves and
Oh,
really
absolutely.
draw conclusions based on solid evidence and real things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you went off and you decided that while you had been doing plastic surgery that things were happening to your body, and so that's what sort of made you decide to change.
Yes, that was the beginning. When I had to, as a matter of fact, when I came out of the hospital, the that third time, I was so exhausted, so weak that I had to have a couch put in my office right next to my exam room. So I used to have my exams at one end of the hall, and then my office would be at the other end of the hall. And so when I was feeling well, I would walk back and forth, in between patients. Well, after that third time, I was so exhausted that I had to have my couch moved to the office right next to where I saw people, so that all I had to do was walk out of the one office and into the next one, out of one room and into the next, so that I could sit there and rest before the next patient came in. And that was ridiculous. And so that's when I knew I had to change what I was doing. Because it is something that I see in a lot of the executives that I work with, a lot of the people that I work with, where we're so focused on doing what we do, doing what we love to do, not wanting to stop, that when our health starts to suffer, we ignore it until it's a disaster. And some people call it burnout, some people call it a breakdown, whatever you want to say. Either your body breaks down, your mind breaks down, or both. We keep going until we can't anymore. And what I want is to get people to understand that we can get ahead of that. We don't have to wait until it's a disaster or a bad thing.
All too often it sneaks up on you because it happens so slowly.
Yes,
And
yes.
we tend to not be nearly as aware of our bodies as we should be. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when Karen became ill in 2014, she had bronchitis and it kept getting worse. And she said, no, it's going to get better. And I had to actually go out of town. And while out of town, it really got worse. And her sister, who was a CCU nurse,
Mm-hmm.
actually, I called her and said, this is going on. And she called Karen and listened to her for just a few seconds and said, either you call an ambulance and go to the hospital or I will.
Ooh.
And she went in and they said it was the flu at first
Uh-huh.
and didn't do a lot. But they monitored her. So
Mm-hmm.
that was on a Saturday, and Sunday, suddenly they had to put her in the ICU, intubate her. She had double pneumonia and acute respiratory distress
Oh
syndrome.
no.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
What I learned is that pneumonia can really sneak up very quickly, because I said, well, you didn't see any of that Saturday. And the doctor said, no, it wasn't there.
Wow. Wow. Yes, it can. It can. It can definitely blossom and bloom very quickly. But that's one of the other things, is that luckily your wife had somebody who could hear her and told her what to do. But a lot of us don't. And so one of the things that we need to be able to know is what our own bodies are trying to tell us,
Mm-hmm.
when they're feeling well, when they're working well, and when they're not. And where they're not, then we need to be able to go and get help.
Well, she wasn't listening to me, which was unfortunate, but her sister
Her
gave her
sister
an
was able.
ultimatum. But it was so bad, her lungs were like 90% occluded, and they actually had to use an intubator and have a PEEPS level of 39 just to get air into her lungs.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and normally that would just explode lungs, and uh,
Exactly.
but she did come out of it, and family then convinced us we should move from Northern California to Southern California. We love Northern California, but we moved to be closer to family, and it's worked
Oh,
out very
okay.
well. It's
Okay.
worked
I
out
was
well.
wondering if there was a difference between the northern, because the weather's different too. I didn't know if that was it. Yeah.
Well, and we live in a town that's 2,850 feet above sea level. And so it's different than like LA because we're up in what's called the high desert. So for example, this morning it was down to 40 degrees and we do put up with cold weather.
Even in Southern Cal, well, I guess okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
It's got
happens.
where we are now in North Carolina. It's getting into the 40s in the mornings too, and we're like, "Ooh, this is kind of nippy here,"
Yeah,
but that's okay. That's all
we'll
right.
cope.
We will.
But
We will.
well, and unfortunately, Karen's body finally she was in a wheelchair her whole life, and her body just finally kind of started giving out, and we lost her last November 12th. So it
Mm.
was a year on Sunday. And as I tell people, she's still around, and if I don't behave, I'm going to hear about it. So I
Oh,
try to
definitely,
try to make sure I'm a good kid.
definitely. Yes.
But we're in a house that we built together. We had it made it completely accessible, and then it's well insulated, and it's got solar, so we do okay.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, so you, my gosh, you've had essentially three careers to a degree,
Three.
although
Yes.
plastic surgery and life medicine are sort of similar, but you made this jump from ballet to medicine, which is a huge thing. And you explained a little bit about that. But tell us more about life medicine and what that's really about. And, we can obviously spend some time talking about that.
Oh, absolutely. I love it too. So I call it lifestyle medicine because people will get a better grasp of what I do. It's changing things in your lifestyle that will help your health. So, for instance, it's changing what you're eating. And a very simple thing that can help everyone is to eat whole foods. Eat foods that you actually recognize in the form that they're coming. So instead of a processed potato chip that fits all in a can because they're all the same size, eating a potato, an actual potato. So that's like one of the biggest things you can do that will change your health. As far as movement, a lot of us think that we have to go to a gym and spend hours in the gym every day. Well, we don't. We just need to get up and move ourselves. And sometimes what we do in Premier Wellness, which is now Balanced Performance, and I'll tell you why that is as well in a second. What we do there is just have people move, say every hour, get up and move for an hour, for a minute or two. And if you do that throughout the day, by the time you get to the end of the day, you have moved yet 30 minutes that is recommended that we all do.
Yeah.
Sleeping more, getting your hormones in shape, lowering your stress levels. These are all very simple things that we kind of push to the wayside or think aren't very important, but they have a huge impact on our health going forward. So that's lifestyle medicine.
Well, I will admit that I still, from time to time, eat potato chips.
And that's a good thing because
But
it's
I can
80
go to
20.
Costco and buy a bag of Ruffles, and it will last a month to 6 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Or longer.
I'm
because
impressed.
I love I love to eat more whole foods. I don't eat probably as many like baked potatoes as I should, but I just don't eat that many potatoes in general. But by the same token, I hear exactly what you're saying. What about things like sweet potato fries? I hear a lot of people say, well, they're healthy, they're okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing. If you're making them yourself, absolutely yes. However, if you're buying them at, like a regular restaurant or something, or even frozen in the frozen department, they often put additives so that they don't stick together. So yes, the sweet potato part of it is fine, but what they do to make the fries not stick together in the bag can be not as healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a matter of reading what the ingredients are and also the oil that they're fried in. But we don't want to go too far down down
Well,
into the weeds. But different oils have different do different things with your body as far as inflammation.
I use this new oil called air fryer.
Yes,
So
exactly.
they're oxygenated. And we got an air fryer about 3 years ago. And I think actually for the first time in 4 or 5 months, I actually turned my oven on because I had something that I wanted to probably do in the oven as opposed to the air fryer, just because I thought it wouldn't fit in the air fryer. But
Mm-hmm.
I love the air fryer. It's
I
one
do
of these that
too.
does everything from baking to broiling and even air frying. So
Exactly.
it is my mainstay for cooking and love it.
Oh, they're wonderful. And you use so much less oil and you still get that crunch, which is what I think most of us really
Absolutely.
want. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily want all of the fat. We just want the crunch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I
Mm-hmm.
don't use any oil when I'm using the air
Mm-hmm.
fryer because I don't see any need to do that,
Yes.
and it tastes
Yes.
pretty good.
It does. It does.
But I
So
hear what you're saying in general. What about things like um, teaching people to be more introspective and reflective during the day? To one of the things I tell people, and we talk about it in the book, is about slowing down, taking time at the end of the day to think about what happened. Don't view things as failures or negative. View things as learning opportunities, and even the things that you did really well. What could you do better? The things that didn't go like you thought they should. Why? And what do you do so that won't happen again? And take the time to do that every night.
exactly. I love that. You know, the fact that you actually think about as you're going through your day. And then when you get to the end of your day, what actually happened. So it's not just a blur because we were just talking about how fast the time goes, how fast the days and the weeks and the months go. And if you're not doing some of that introspection, it's going to fly even faster. One of the things that I like to say to the people that I work with is I call it listen, let go, and live. So you want to listen to what your body is trying to tell you, you know, just listening, sitting down, and maybe it means taking some time off, going off by yourself and just listening. Sometimes it means writing things down. Someone may not know if a particular food is irritating them. Well, if you write it down, you can follow patterns. So listening to what your body's telling you. The second is to let go of whatever isn't serving you. And that can be hard. You know, if there's
Mm-hmm.
something that we just love or you know, although it's not doing our bodies well or not doing well for us, we need to be able to let it go. So whether that's a food or sometimes it's a job or sometimes it's even a relationship, just being able to let things go that are no longer serving us. And then the third one is to thrive. You listen, let go, and then you live. And so you're going to live your own version of thriving, you know, whatever that is. And I say, it is an example, I use hot yoga because I don't like being hot. I love yoga, but I do not like being hot. And so I'm not going to do hot yoga. I'm just going to let that go and live my own version, no matter how many people tell me it's wonderful for you. So it's really just a matter of doing the things that you enjoy, that bring you joy, that bring your body health and vitality. And life gets better like that, just gets better that way.
Well, and the reality is that not every single thing works exactly the same way for every single person.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And it's important to again look and listen to your body. And we just
Mhm.
don't,
We
not
don't.
nearly as much as we ought to.
We don't. Yeah. And one of the biggest things are, you know, the perfect diet, because there is no such thing. First of all, we shouldn't be on diets anyway. But but there's no such thing. It all depends on the person, what their body likes, what they like. And we're so much into this. Well, I only do keto and keto's got to work for everybody, or I do paleo, or I do vegan, or whatever it is. We get into these camps where we can't see what works for other people as well. What works for us well works for us well. And we shouldn't be forcing it on anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we should be open to the fact that if it's working for someone else, then that should be a good thing, which is kind of the same thing that you're
Exactly.
saying.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes. That
But it's
yeah.
kind of crazy the way we do stuff. Again, it gets back to not really paying attention to the things around us. Now we know I think there are commonalities that are bad, as you point out, eating potato chips all the time or other things like that are not good for you. I remember a baseball pitcher. Oh gosh, when did Denny McLain pitch in the '60s? in the late 60s or mid 60s. And one of the things that he was known for was drinking 30 or so bottles of Pepsi every day, which did affect his teeth after a while.
Oh,
He did win 30 games one year, which is why he was very famous, but still, Denny drank a lot of Pepsi. I have just never been much of a soft drink drinker like that.
mhm. Exactly. Yeah. As a matter of fact, when you say that, I have my very first client used to drink 25 cans of Diet Cola every single day.
Oh,
25 cans. So it didn't rot her teeth, but it sure did knock her energy out because she thought that was the only way that she could make it through the day. So you're right. We get into these habits that we think are really helping us, and they don't necessarily. Yeah.
gee, is this the time to say that I have a friend who years and years ago, when the LA Rams were first in LA, would sit down with a case of beer every Sunday and drink the whole case while he watched the Rams game?
Oh, wait. A case?
Yeah,
Oh my
24 cans.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I can't even make it through a can, much less a case.
I've
So.
never liked beer. I love water though. I drink a lot of
Yeah,
water during the day, and
yeah.
just I've
Oh my
always liked
goodness.
water. And I do
Mhm.
drink tea in the morning, but
Mhm.
tea and caffeine's never bothered me, but I like a hot drink, and so tea
In the
is less
morning.
in the morning,
Yes, right? Yeah,
and it
me too.
has a whole lot less calories than hot chocolate. So I'll stick with the tea most of the time.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. But when you were talking just before about how different things can affect people differently, it reminded me of, we've all heard these stories of people who were in their 90s who are still smoking their cigarettes and having a drink every day, and it worked for them. But we know that that is not what works for the majority of people. So we
Yeah.
just need to be more realistic, I think.
And maybe they didn't get cancer or anything from the cigarettes, but it doesn't change the fact of what cigarettes do to people.
Exactly,
And if they lived
exactly.
into their 90s, that's great. One can only wonder how much longer they might have lived if they didn't do it at all.
If they
But
hadn't, exactly, exactly. Yes, yes,
it's one of
yes,
those things.
yes, it is.
So clearly, though, it's more than eating, and it's more than sleeping. It is really a holistic approach that we need to look at and learn about for ourselves and figure out what works for us, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I tell people when someone starts to work with us, we have an assessment that shows them what's working well in their lives and what's maybe not working so well. And then they have the option of either making the things that are working well like the best they can possibly be, or they can start with the things that they are struggling with a little bit and see if they can get those to be better. And that's often what people will choose, because they'll see, oh my goodness, I'm not sleeping well enough, or my hormones are out of order, or, my relations, whatever it might be, they want to get those better. And so it gives them the opportunity to choose what they're going to do. And that's the main thing. It's because when we try to change everything all at once, usually nothing gets happening. Nothing happens because it's just too much and our bodies get overwhelmed. But if we choose one thing and work on that systematically, then we usually are able to achieve those things going forward.
Why is it that more traditional medicine doesn't tend to focus nearly as much on the whole idea of the holistic approach?
Uh, well,
Did
if
I
I
open
think
up
I
a can of worms there or what?
can, we won't say the secret big pharma, but no. Usually,
Okay.
what tends to happen is that in medical school you were taught, here's a disease, here's how you treat it. Okay, here's the
Take a
disease, here's
shot,
the
take
medicine
aspirin.
exactly. Here's the therapy, the medication, the drug, whatever it might be to fix it. And so I almost think of it as, especially like when, as I was mentioning before, when people would come in with diabetes, you'd give them their pill and they'd go away until the pill didn't work. And then you'd give them another pill. And then finally they're on insulin. And so it's just like this wheel that keeps going down and down and down. And so I think of it almost as if our health, the leaves on a tree. And when we don't have our health, the leaves are brown. They're brown and they're about to fall off. And traditional medicine is taking a can of green paint and painting those leaves green again. So they look good. We're taking that medicine. The leaves look good. They look green, but they're not any healthier. And until we change what's causing that, until we change what's causing diabetes or the high blood pressure, whether it's stress or sleep or nutrition or movement or relationships, whatever it might be, until we change those things, we can't change the actual leaves on the tree and make them healthy again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is an issue. And, you're right. I know that a lot of it has to do with people want to continue to sell drugs and so on. And, and medicine can be helpful, but are we learning collectively in medical science and elsewhere that maybe there really is more to it than just taking more drugs? Or have we really started to alter our attitudes? And I'm gathering that you have an answer for that.
I don't think we're quite there yet. And I say that mainly because as I mentioned, I'm in lifestyle medicine. Some people call it functional medicine, integrated medicine, holistic medicine, whatever name you want to give it, where we're not just looking to a medication or a pill to heal. We're looking at the entire body, the mind, the soul, the everything. And it's not until we have these two camps still. And those of us in the lifestyle integrative side are still looked at a little bit askance by those who do still treat with traditional medications. Almost as if, like, what's wrong with them, or what are they trying to do? Because that's not the way we were taught in medical school.
Yeah. And the reality is that I think what you would say is there is nothing wrong with medications, but there's a lot more to keeping a body healthy than just medication.
Absolutely. So, when someone starts to work with me, a lot of times we'll give them supplements, a specific supplement to support a need. Say, for instance, they might need magnesium. And so I will give them magnesium initially, but not with the thought that they will be taking magnesium for the rest of their lives. It's still until their bodies get healthier. Whereas that's not necessarily the thought with traditional medications. It's the traditional medications are thought to be the solution to the dis-ease that the person has,
rather than being a bridge.
Exactly.
Well, obviously a lot of what you really encourage people to do is to change their mindsets. Do you have a story that you can tell about any kind of a specific example where a mindset change really dramatically changed a person, and obviously for the better?
Oh,
I'll bet
there
you
are so
do.
many. There are so many. One of my favorite, just because it illustrates the ripple effect, is a woman who had rheumatoid arthritis, and one of the first things that we were doing, let's go to Whole Foods, let's get away from the processed sugars and carbohydrates. And at first, it was hard for her. She said because she really, really, really loved what she was eating, but she tried it for a week and felt so much better that it's like a switch had flipped in her head. And so she was able to say, okay, this is so much better for me that I'm going to kind of struggle through until my body realizes that it doesn't need this stuff anymore. And so she did. And that was, she changed herself. But the thing that was so amazing was that people around her, her mom saw her then eating the way she was. And her mom said, okay, maybe I need to change this too, because maybe I don't have to struggle anymore either. And so she literally had this ripple effect in her family of health. It was amazing.
And it's nice to have a support system. So when you've got several people doing it, they obviously help each other.
Yes. As opposed to, someone else who's going to bring out the box of cookies, your favorite cookie whenever you sit down. Yes. I've had them in both ways.
I know people think I'm crazy, but not this year, last year, I bought a case of Thin Mints from the Girl Scouts.
Uh-huh.
And I think there are still, out of the 12 boxes, 10 either in my freezer or on a pantry shelf.
Oh my
Of
goodness.
course, it's easy, out of sight, out of mind, right? So unless I touch it, I keep forgetting about it. But but I do find them up there and just plain don't go after them. They're a great treat, and I love it as a treat. But I have grown out of needing to have lots of that stuff. And occasionally, if I catch myself really wanting to have more sugar and more of those things, it's a conscious effort, but I can stop. But the Thin Mints are still up there, and they'll be devoured over time. Actually, I feel more guilty every year because I have too many boxes of Thin Mints to buy more from the Girl Scouts to support them.
Oh no! Yes, yes, yeah. I think we feel, especially with sugar, because sugar really is very addictive. It's been proven to really turn certain receptors on in our brain.
Yeah.
But we feel that we can't do without it until we kind of get over. It's almost like we go through withdrawal.
Yeah.
Once you get on that other side, though, then you're able to say, I don't really need that, and people will look at you and they'll go, "Really?" But it's true.
So for me, I have something sweet when I want to, but I've gone days without, and I'm not trying to brag, but rather I understand exactly what you're saying, and it's so much better and fulfilling because I know that I can eat, and I weigh myself every day. So I also make sure that I don't gain weight, which is another reminder.
Exactly.
But I do like to not have to rely on eating some of that stuff. So the Thin Mints are there, but they will slowly go down. And, worst case, I can buy Thin Mints and give them to somebody else. And I've done that too.
Exactly.
Got to support the Girl Scouts.
That's right. I love that.
Got to deal with the important things in life, needless to say. Yes. Well, so you, do you get a lot of criticism from traditional medicine? Do you get a lot of people saying you're obviously a screwball or anything like that? Or
to my face, no. And I think a lot of that has to be, I was a former plastic surgeon and I'm a physician, but I do hear from other traditional practitioners when they're talking about, say, a health coach or someone that they may not know, that they're put down just a little bit. So, to be honest, I do remember when I was in the hospital and I was still trying to do both plastic surgery and lifestyle medicine, trying to do them together. There was a little bit of friction between my practice and the hospital because they just didn't understand the reason for it. So yeah, there is a little, but I haven't been, totally ground down into the ground about it. Thank goodness. But I think it really has to do with a lot of my own, who I was in the scheme of things.
My fifth guide dog was Roselle. She is the one who was with me in the World Trade Center on September 11th. And when we moved back to California, we actually lived in an area just a little bit of ways. Well, we were in an area called Belmarin Keys, which was built to be like Venice, Italy. So every house was either on a lagoon or a waterway between lagoons. And so across the lagoon from us was a family, the Wilsons, who, among other things, had adopted Roselle's father, a breeder from Guide Dogs for the Blind, Sievert. So they introduced us to their vet, Dr. Coddington, who was a holistic medicine type of person. And he, as much as anything, encouraged Eastern medicine, even on Roselle, at various times. And there were some times that she needed supplements and so on. And so I got a really great opportunity to learn from him, both in terms of dealing with Roselle, but obviously other things that helped the philosophy that I was able to adopt and Karen was able to adopt in our lives, because he made such a difference in Roselle's life.
I love that. Yes.
It was kind of cool. So what today would you suggest to people as initial steps to starting to overcome maybe some of their health issues or deal with getting their life more in balance?
Ooh, I love that question. um, if you have,
Besides eating bagels from New York.
that's true. You gotta eat from New York.
Yeah.
What I would say first is to know your numbers. Okay. And I say that because I deal with so many people who have no idea what their blood sugar is or what their hemoglobin A1C is, which is related
Right.
to your blood sugar. They don't know what their what their cholesterol is, or they just don't know. And if you don't know, you can't change things. You can't
Mm-hmm.
make them better if you don't know. So to know. A lot of times, what I hear is, well, I had my blood work drawn, but my doctor told me everything was fine, so I didn't even look. Instead, you are your best physician. You know your body best. And so when you know your numbers, when you know the trends that you're seeing, because it's trends about trends as well. If every year, your blood sugar is getting a little higher and a little higher and a little higher, eventually it's going to flip over that where it's not okay anymore. So looking at trends is so important. So that's probably the very first thing. And once you've got that and sometimes it requires a little push with your primary care to ask them to really explain your labs and not just say everything's fine, to really explain them and to have them look at optimal levels, not just normal levels, because there's a lot of what I call dis-ease in the normal,
Mm-hmm.
in that normal range. So we want numbers that are optimal for our bodies. That's probably the first thing. And then the second is, like I said, start listening to what your body's telling you. So if you're exhausted, why are you exhausted? Is it that you're not sleeping enough? Is it you're not eating well enough? Is it that you're running yourself ragged? Is it that you have too much stress? Why are you tired? So don't just accept the symptom, but try to start delving deeply into why you have that symptom.
Well, the interesting thing in what you're saying about all that, at least from my perspective, is that I love numbers, and I personally, fortunately, have a medical plan that allows me access to automatically all of that. We use Kaiser, and so whenever we go and do lab tests, all the results are sent to or are stored in our records, and we get
Mm-hmm.
messages to say here are the numbers, and I
Mm-hmm.
always look at the numbers.
Yes.
And I think that's extremely important to do. Now, I don't remember what my cholesterol is. I don't remember the number right now,
No,
but
no.
I also know that it was considered to be well within the normal range,
Mm-hmm.
and whether I'd call it optimal or not, I don't know. It could be considered that it was, but I appreciate what you're saying, and it's really important to know the numbers and to get the data for yourself. Even with your doctor, who may be a great expert, you still need to know that information directly.
Yes. 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 Absolutely.
And that's what all happens all too unoften, that we don't get the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that the second part of that is we often believe that if mom had diabetes, I'm going to have diabetes, or if dad had high blood pressure, I'm going to have high blood pressure. And so the second thing that I always share with people is that you are your own person and you can change what your genetics or how your genetics are expressed. So you can't change your genes, but you can change the way they are expressed. So you don't have to, just because everybody in your family has diabetes, it does not mean that you have to have diabetes. And so just knowing that you are the captain of your own ship, if you're going to put it that way, for your health.
Well, so if everybody in your family has diabetes, it seems to me what you need to do is to, if you're truly concerned about it and want to address it, start to look at what your options are. And then it also goes back to the numbers. Keep an eye on the numbers to see if you're really having a positive effect on your body.
Exactly, exactly. One of there are some new technologies out there now that make it so much easier because before, if you wanted to know your blood sugar was on a routine basis, you had to stick your finger, and let's
Hmm.
be honest, that's not fun.
No.
It's not fun. But now they have little devices that you can put on your arm, and it will tell you continuously what your blood glucose is for a period of 2 weeks. So you can do something like, what happens when I eat this particular food? What does it do to my blood sugar? And
Hmm.
then you can change your meals and your nutrition depending on real data, not just guessing or looking at what somebody else is saying that you should do. You're going to see what your body particularly loves.
And yeah, obviously how it's affecting you, and
Mm-hmm.
act accordingly. Again, it gets back to do the basics yourself.
Exactly. Exactly.
What should people do more in the community and getting more community support to help them deal
Mhm.
with issues and help the community deal with issues?
Yes, yes. Um, I like to look at the blue zones as the beacons, as far as community is concerned. So the blue zones are these areas around the world where people consistently live into their 90s and are healthy. So they're not just creaking through and barely making it. They're living full and vibrant lives well into their 90s. And one of the things that they notice, one of the big things that they notice is they all have strong communities. They all, they have families and groups that all live together, work together, enjoy life together. And so when we bring those things back to our environments, it just changes. I ask people, do you know your neighbors? Do you know the people in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
And if not, go out and start introducing yourself, start becoming connected with the people in your area so that you all can support each other going up. If that doesn't work, then you go and find things for groups that you're in, things that you're interested in, whether it's golf. I'm not a golfer,
Yeah.
but
Well, yeah, me neither.
maybe it's music, or my husband and daughter just joined an astronomy group. I mean, it's just a lot of, you join what you're interested in and grow together. So that's a huge thing for community.
You have a family, which is cool. How do you deal with personal life balance and balancing that with professional work?
I do it so much better now. Let me
I
say.
I got that impression.
Well, when I didn't do it so well, it's when I was burning the candle at both ends. I was the surgeon, the everything all day, and then the mom and thing all night. That does not work. What I have learned since then is that there is balance. And what balance is not necessarily going to do everything exactly even all the time. What it does mean, though, is that some days your work is going to take precedence, some days your family is going to take precedence, and you need to be able to alter your life in a way that that's possible. So if you're in a position or a job or something where you can't make that change, then maybe it's time to start looking at a way to make that happen. Maybe it means you need to move your job. Maybe it means you can change your job, change things within your job. But it's balance is all about give and take. And, especially now, I think a lot of us are, after the last couple of years with working from home, a lot of us got into that thing where work and home were just one big conglomerate, that sort of thing. And we need to be able to separate it. So for me, when I'm working at home, I have a hard stop. I stop at, and I will determine whether it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, sometimes it's 7 p.m. But whatever it is, that's when it stops. And
Hmm.
then I'm home. Even though I haven't left the location, then I'm home. And if you don't do that, then you do get into that place where it's just 24/7 nonstop. And that's not sustainable.
That doesn't help at all.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
What are some innovations that you're seeing, some positive innovations that are really helping move the whole concept of wellness forward?
Mm-hmm. Well, the things like the continuous glucose monitor that I just shared with you, there's more technology now that we can use, so that's a good thing. I do like to caution people though, because I'm a tech nerd kind of, that you don't want to just depend on those as well. So even, no matter how good the tech is, there are things like another thing that I use is what's called a brain tap, where you're using light and sound and beats to help reduce your anxiety, to increase motivation, to increase sleep better, things like that. That there are technologies that can assist you in getting your body healthier and stronger. So those things are just amazing that they're coming out now as well. But I say with everyone that the most important thing is knowing what works for you and working with that first.
I love that people are also starting to learn, or some people at least are starting to learn more about things like meditation and are
Oh,
seeing
yes.
the value, which goes back to being reflective, introspective, and so on, but that they're recognizing that taking that time to meditate is extremely
Yes.
important.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting you should say that, because that didn't even come to mind, because that's so long been a part of what I do. I didn't
Yeah.
even think about it. But yes, definitely meditation. However, what I do hear a lot, especially from people who are busy and haven't yet learned how to slow down and de-stress, they're like, I can't meditate. I'm too busy. I can't stay quiet enough to do that. And that's why I found sometimes the technologies can help a little bit, because they get past that. You don't
Yeah.
have, you just listen, and it's going to take you there. Once you get to that point where where you know what it feels like to slow down, slow your breath, slow your heart, slow your brain pattern. When you're able to do that, then you can go into something like the traditional meditation and reap the benefits there as well.
How do you stay resilient? You must have a mantra or something that you use, or a philosophy that you use to keep yourself resilient and positive in life.
What's funny? It's when I was thinking about that, it's nothing lasts forever. That's it. Not the good stuff, but not the bad stuff either.
Yeah.
So life flows. It ebbs and it flows, and you go with that flow.
And the good stuff changes.
It
It doesn't
does.
mean
It
that it's going
does.
to go away. It's going to be different good stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. And probably a Pollyanna anyway by heart, but that has taken me quite a way.
We
Mhm.
named the book that's coming out Live Like a Guide Dog because one of the most important things is dogs live in the moment. Dogs don't do what if. And it's
Oh,
something that I learned after September 11th, when we were concerned about how all of that would affect Roselle. And I talked with the
uh-huh,
guide dog trainers, and they
uh-huh,
said, did anything affect her directly? Did she get hit or anything? And I said,
uh-huh.
no. And they said, well, then it's over for her. It's all gone.
Wow. That is so
which
cool.
which is so true. We
Yes.
worry about all the things that we don't have any control over. We're
Mhm.
afraid of so many things, and as is pointed out so often, none of those things ever come to pass. We
They
just worry
don't.
about things way too
Just
much.
worry. Yes, yes. I think there's a saying that says worry is just praying for things you don't want.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely true. Well, this has been really fun.
Yes,
And
it has.
I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. If people want to reach out and find you, how do they do that? Oh wait. Well, let me go ahead, answer that, and then I have one more question.
Okay. Okay. So that actually leads into what I was saying I was going to mention before, why we switched our name. We're
That's
in
what
the
I was just going to
process of
ask you. Yeah.
switching. Yes. We're in the process of switching our name from Premier Wellness to Balanced Performance.
Yeah.
And the reason was Premier Wellness is, we thought, kind of generic. It's speaking about wellness, and it was a good thing and loved it. Have been that for 6 years. But what we found people are really looking for, they want the balance in their lives, and they want to be able to perform. They want to be at the top of their game, both at work, but they also want to be, I call them the superheroes at home. They want to have both, but they want it with balance. And so we are literally in the process of changing the name of our company to Balanced Performance, because that's what we're going to teach you, or help you and assist you to get to. So by the time this comes out, which will be mid-January, we will be balancedperformance.pro, as in Balanced Performance Professionals. And that's where you'll be able to find us.
Wow. So people can go to balanceperformance.pro.
Correct.
And are you on things like LinkedIn and so on where they can find you? Or
I am on LinkedIn. I'm Dr. Susan Lovelle on LinkedIn.
and Lovelle
Facebook,
is Love.
LLE.
Okay.
Yes. Dr. Susan Lovelle, Dr. Susan Lovelle. We're on Facebook. It is still Premier Wellness. Probably by then that will also be switched over.
Work.
But well, I'll give you the info. And we're on Instagram as well. And that's
Great.
Premier Wellness _ at this point. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I hope people listen and they'll reach out to you. Do you work with clients all over?
We work all over. If they're out of the state, out of North Carolina, I can work either as just a simple consultant, or if they want to work with me one-on-one as me being their lifestyle physician, they would have to meet me details. They would have to meet me at least once in North Carolina or meet once in person, and then we can do the rest virtually.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, everyone, there you go. So meet up with Dr. Susan. I think it would be a lot of fun. And I've enjoyed very much and value very much all the insights that you brought us. So thank you for being here. And I want to thank you for listening. Hope that you enjoyed this. I'd love to hear from you. Please email me your thoughts, your observations, your comments. You can reach me at MichaelHI, MichaelHI at accessibe.com. Or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhinkson.com/podcast. And Michael Hinkson is MichaelHingson, all one word. So wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We value the ratings. We love them. And we love hearing your thoughts and your feedback as you're giving ratings. So please do that. And wherever you're listening, we really appreciate it. And I'm sure Dr. Susan does as well. And again, one more time, Susan, we really appreciate you being here and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Michael.